first round of questions, and the first speaker, according to my notes here, will be Mr. Vidal from the Conservative Party. Mr. Vidal, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity today. I want to just take a minute at the beginning of this to thank all of the folks that are here today, Mr. Daniels, Mr. Calla, Mr. Jules, and also Mr. Berna, who's sitting there in the background quietly so far. The work you've done is incredible, and I've had the privilege of kind of seeing some of that work and look forward to the opportunity of just hearing what you have to say today to help us in this study. I want to be really clear about the reasons that we put forward this study and why we asked for this study. This committee historically, and I know there's many new members, and this is our first study of the new session here, but this committee historically has all really worked hard to find better outcomes for First Nations communities. And in one of the submissions that we received yesterday from Mr. Jules, I read that the Indigenous economy has the youngest population, the fastest growing labor force, has significant unused capacity, and is underutilized significantly. I would suggest to you that we got to figure this out, and the future of Canada is the future of Canada's success is critical in us figuring this out. So, if I've learned anything from my past meetings with you folks, is that good governance leads to capacity, capacity leads to success, both fiscally and otherwise, and that's success is ultimately the path to self-determination. Mr. Calla, you've presented the roadmap project. I've had the privilege of kind of seeing some of your work on that a couple of times, and so I just want to focus my first question around that roadmap project. And my question is actually quite simple. It's just, what are the departments doing, or maybe better, what are they not doing to provide you the support that you would like to see so that the roadmap project becomes an ultimate success?
Thank you for your question. We have presented the roadmap to both ISCNSERNA. They have received it. They're not opposed to it, but they're not. We'd like to see it dealt with a better sense of urgency. Okay, we can't wait for 2 years or 3 years for this stuff to be implemented. We need it to be accepted. We need them to declare that it'll be accepted. We need it to be resourced through the parliamentary appropriation process. We think that the three institutions have proven by what has been accomplished to date the value for money and when we ask for it. And what I would like to see is a declaration that the path to reconciliation, while not excluding other approaches, is defined in what we're doing, what the roadmap reflects, and a commitment to ensure that all three of the institutions, because we're all speaking basically about the same kind of thing, saying it a little differently, get what they need to be able to implement their vision. And I think that there's a difficulty. As I said in my opening comments, there needs to be a change in attitude, policies, regulations, and legislation in order for these things to be achieved. And we have to agree that we have to start doing that now. And we can't wait the 10 years it took to get the FMA legislation passed for these kinds of changes to take place. So there's got to be an increased sense of urgency.
And I want to pick up, I'm going to pick up on what you said in there, Mr. Calla. Ultimately, our study is looking at barriers. And I'm curious, just to, in response to your comments, maybe would you agree that there's a historical relationship within the departments and that relationship with First Nations where there's a reluctance to change or reluctance to maybe give over some control of things? And would it not improve the fiscal relationship to transfer using data-driven statistical formulas that are predictable, instead of putting bureaucrats in places where they're handcuffed by existing structures and barriers, and they're making decisions under crisis management sometimes, and they're placed, this is not necessarily a criticism of bureaucrats, it's just they're placed in a position where they are forced to work within a system that's been the same for so long that it's hard to change. Sorry, that's maybe a long way of asking. Do you think that's true, and is there ways that we could change that?
Well, it is true that the bureaucrats are challenged because of existing mandates. In fact, I would argue that the government itself is in conflict because it has the fiduciary duty, but it also has a responsibility to protect the crown. Those two don't always align, in my view. And I'm not a lawyer, I'm an accountant. So I'm sure lawyers will want to argue with me. But I think it is a challenge. And for the bureaucracy is not encouraged at all levels to take risk. There's zero tolerance for risk. And what the institutions do are to put themselves in a position where we can stand between the government and First Nations, and we can manage that risk. We can identify that risk and management. And I think what we're saying is government bureaucracies need to move away. Indigenous organizations and institutions need to move in. And what we've proven through the FMA is that Indigenous design solutions work, and you need to give us the power to continue to create.
I'm going to jump back in quickly because the chair is going to cut me off in about 20 seconds here. So really quick question. What could we as legislators do to help ensure more First Nations follow your scheduling, accreditation process, and some of the certification things that your institutions have in place?
Ensure that we have the financial resources to fulfill our mandate and our purposes under the Act. We can do it, but we can't do it if we don't have the resources to be able to do it, all of us. And that was a big problem in the very beginning of this legislation. When you create institutions, you need to ensure that they have sufficient resources to